all right, I'm not in class, obviously. Um, I'm just gonna do this instead. Jack and I have Shintoism and Hirihito, and I'm gonna take the Shintoism half of it. But before I like talk about Shintoism or what that means or what they believe, I'm actually gonna tell the creation story for Shintoism because it like summarizes well like a lot of the main tenets. Um, so, story goes that there was this pair of gods, a man and a woman. The man named Izanaji and a woman named Izanami. Um, they are standing in heaven when, for some reason, the man feels the need to stir the oceans of the earth with a jeweled spear. And at this time, there was no land on earth, it was just a big sphere of water. Um, and when he thrusts his jeweled spear into the ocean, the central island of Japan forms. Um, so they move to this island, um, and through whatever divine methods, they birth children that become the other islands. Um, however, don't ask me how that works. However, their first child is actually deformed. Their first child um, has birth deformities and is set adrift into the ocean and abandoned. Um, and apparently, somewhere along the line, the woman, Izanami, uh, made a mistake in the ritual because she spoke first. Um, and there's basically the way that's like interpreted by theologians now is that women are subordinate to the man. So like her trying to like step up and initiate the ritual was like unnatural and shouldn't have happened, and therefore this deformed child was born, and they abandoned it because it was unnatural. Um, from that, the woman gets it tough again because while giving birth, she dies. While giving birth to the fire god, she dies. Um, and she goes to the underworld, as you do, and the husband, Izanaji, goes after her to try to save her from the underworld. Doesn't work, um, and goes back to the earth itself to have the inaugural like purification ceremony for Shintoism. He bathes in the sea to try to like rid himself of the underworld energy, and story goes that he wipes his left eye, and the sun goddess is born. He wipes his right eye, and the moon god is born, and then he wipes his nose, and the storm god is born. Um, don't really get how that works, but what's important to note is actually of those three gods, the sun goddess is the one really central to this conversation. So the sun goddess Amaterasu, whose name translates to great divinity illuminating heaven, is the celestial deity for Shinto. And another piece of the mythos, she apparently was in charge of like making sure mankind was in harmony with the universe and nature and the gods. Um, so her grandson Jimmu is given the three imperial treasures, which basically prove that this guy Jimmu, the first emperor of Japan, is descended from gods, because he has these three treasures from the sun goddess, which are, in case you're wondering, a mirror, a jeweled necklace, and a sword. Um, so, things to note about this. Um, Shintoism is all about, more than anything, it's a belief system and has become, throughout the centuries, just part of regular Japanese culture in a lot of ways and tradition. And a lot of the things you can take away from these stories actually like still show up in society today. So like the female being subordinate to the male, something that happens everywhere. But in Japan, like they literally have female only subway cars because sexual assault is so bad. Because Japan was the first land to be created and was literally created by gods. it is a chosen land full of chosen people, and the land itself is holy, and the people on it are chosen holy people descended from God. And somehow, like, the most descended from God is the emperor. So for a long time in Japanese history, the emperor is sort of without any substantial power, and the shogun has all of the real power. However, it does imply a mandate of heaven, that the emperor is ruling through the permission of the gods. And the thing about abandoning children, I don't know if you can hear that, abandoning children is an idea of like conformity, that things have to be natural and things have to be traditional and they have to be organized and situated and perfectly correct, which is like stereotypical of Japanese culture. So something like interesting talking about this is that 80% of people in Japan today participate in Shinto practices somehow, but only about 20% say they're Shintoists. So in a lot of ways, even though it's not a deeply religious thing, Shinto is just a more participatory kind of religion. So it's almost like people who aren't Christian or aren't particularly devout still like celebrating Christmas because like it's just like a cultural thing, like you just do it because everyone else is doing it, and a country so concerned about conformity and tradition, going to the shrine at the New Year's and doing the purification ceremonies and celebrating the festival is more about being in line and like upholding a tradition and less about like a religious aspect of any of it. And so I've talked a lot about gods, and I've talked about it a lot as like a religion, but it's really closer to like a belief system. There is no like founder, there is no sacred text, there is no like fixed dogmatic values. Shinto translates literally to way of the kami, and kami means God, spirit, essence, sort of. And so like one of the main tenets of Shinto, kind of inspired from like those stories, is that like the natural world is divine. So in Shinto, and in like the Japanese language, there's no difference between the singular and the plural forms of things. So kami is both like a single spirit and also like the collective divinity of the universe. And this like little linguistic difference actually makes a big deal in terms of like talking about the emperor, because the representation of something is also that thing. So like, for example, if you go to like a Shinto shrine, it's common to see like little fox statues or something, and people will clothe them, people will give them gifts, people make sure they're like shiny and fresh and good and new, because there's like that statue is both representing like a fox kami, but inside of that statue is apparently a spirit itself. And actually a super like common thing is you'll see trees in shrines that have these ropes wrapped around them, and that rope delineates that there is a kami, a spirit living in that tree. So that's a bunch about the religion, a little bit about the Meiji Renewal. 1868, right after Matthew Perry lands in Japan, the grandfather of Hirohito, Emperor Meiji, initiates a massive reform. We now call it the Meiji Restoration, which does a lot of different things, but the main things: restores empirical rule, so that means the emperor is now in charge. Borders are open to trade in a new way. Industrialization changes a lot. Military modernizes. But another important thing relating to Shinto, in the new constitution, which gives the emperor like way more power than they used to have, it states explicitly that the emperor is descended from Amaterasu, is descended from God, and has like a divine and supreme authority over the governance of the state. This like form of Shinto becomes called state Shinto, and this is where Shintoism and nationalism intersect. So historically, the emperor is subordinate to the shogun, who actually like does the administration of the state. But in this case, they flip that on its head, and suddenly the emperor is now in charge. So it's around this time that this interpretation of Shinto, where like the emperor is sort of God, has like kami's in him, has the mandate of heaven, we are a chosen people. It's the Meiji Restoration that sort of resurrects all that, and nationalism in Japan rises as they insert themselves as a major industrial military power going into the 20th century.